Farhan thinks that the incarnation is blasphemy, that it's beneath God to become man, to suffer, or even eat food. But what he's mocking isn't Christianity, it's just a straw man built by the Quran. Let's look at what he says, and then we'll respond with the actual theology.
Some people claim that God became a man, but if you stop and think, you realize it's not just wrong, it's impossible. It goes against reason, against human nature, and against what God tells us in the Quran. God by definition is unlimited, eternal, self-sufficient, and perfect. And man by definition is limited, temporary, needy, and imperfect. Saying God became a man is like saying the infinite became finite. It's not deep, it's not mysterious, it's a logical contradiction.
Farhan seems to misunderstand what Christians actually believe. We're not saying that God turned into a man or stopped being God. Chalcedonian Christology makes it crystal clear. Jesus Christ is one person with two natures, fully God and fully man, without confusion, change, division, or separation.
Well, too bad, because Jesus clearly said that I isn't God. How? Because I said only God alone is good. The questioner understood this clearly, which is why the questioner stopped calling him good.
If Jesus is God, this is his perfect moment to say he is God, but he doesn't because he isn't God.
And that's not all, there's more to this.
Not only that, but the early church fathers also agreed upon this, that Jesus is distinct from the Father. Justin Martyr in his work, Dialogue with Trypho, chapter 101. He affirmed that Jesus said that only one is good, and that is the Father who is in heaven. Their understanding are the same as those who viewed Jesus as a lesser God and are distinct from the Father, only being divine and being the Son of God. The Son of God is an honorific title used multiple times in the Bible, both the New Testament and Old Testament. For example, Israel is called God's firstborn, affirming that Israel is the begotten Son of God as they are the firstborn. This is in Exodus chapter 4 verse 22.
The divine nature stayed infinite, eternal, and perfect. He added human nature, not by losing anything, but by taking on something new. It's not the infinite becoming finite, it's the infinite uniting to the finite.
Well, that really depends on what you mean. If you're talking about unity, then yeah, sure. The Bible shows God being united with the finite. I mean, he's even one with Jesus' disciples, right? So let's not act like that's exclusive to Jesus. Just check John chapter 17 verse 21. Jesus literally prays that his disciples be one with God just like he is. So if we're going to say Jesus is God just because he's one with God, then are we ready to call the disciples divine too? Come on now, and don't even get me started on this idea that Jesus must be God just because God united with him. Jesus was a man, flesh, blood, sandals and all. But Numbers chapter 23 verse 19 makes it crystal clear, God is not a man. So unless we're tossing that verse out the window, we've got some explaining to do. Let's not cherry-pick unity and turn it into divinity without reading the fine print, okay?
When Jesus slept, ate, or suffered, that was through his human nature, not because his divine nature got weaker.
So let me get this straight, the God who handcrafted the entire universe, who breathes life into every living thing and doesn't need anybody's help, suddenly needs to borrow a fragile human nature. Acts chapter 17 verse 24 to 25 already told us, he doesn't live in man-made temples and he's not sitting around waiting for human hands to serve him. Self-sufficient means self-sufficient, no weakness, no dependency, no downgrade into flesh and bones.
And ironically, even the Quran has Allah entering into creation, speaking from a bush.
You said Allah entered into the bush just because the voice Moses, peace be upon him, heard came from the direction of the bush? That's like saying your friend is inside your phone just because you hear their voice through the speaker. That's not how it works. Just because the voice came from the bush didn't mean Allah physically dwelled into the bush. Just where did you get that idea from?
Sending his spirit into Mary.
I think this dude referred to these verses of the Quran. And the example of Mary, the daughter of Imran, who guarded her chastity, so we blew into it, her garment, through our spirit. Surah At-Tarim 66. 12. Let's break it down, first. Our spirit, uguale angel Gabriel, this is the scholarly consensus. Our spirit refers to Gabriel, the archangel sent by Allah. Not a fragment of Allah. Not a divine essence. Not a mini-god. Not Allah chopped into pieces. Just Jibril. So when it says, we blew into it, Garman, it's not Allah himself blowing l'ikeis 2CPR, it's Jibril, by Allah's command, delivering the soul of Isa, Jesus, into her womb. Totally miraculous, totally clean, totally without Allah entering into Mary or becoming part of her or anything wildly like that. Second of all, why say our spirit? Because it's an honorific.
So please don't make any stupid claims such as this again. It's laughable to say the least.
Showing up on the Day of Judgment, even revealing his shin according to the Hadith.
Any Muslim who have the correct aqid out inside refute you. The sin of Allah is not like the sin of any of His creations.
So let's not pretend Islam teaches that there's a God who's too transcendent to enter into creation. You already believe the Creator can do that without ceasing to be the Creator.
Except we don't, we believe God can't be likened to his creations not because he lacks the ability to but because by definition it's impossible.
God doesn't need oxygen, food, sleep, or blood. Creation does, and the Creator never becomes a creation. Even before any books or philosophy, every human being naturally feels that the Creator must be above weakness. No child naturally believes God eats, sleeps, or dies, or that God is a human or can become a human. This is the fitra, the pure instinct, the natural disposition that we incline to that Allah has placed inside of us.
Of course, the idea that God would become man isn't something that you'd figure out just naturally by looking around. That's exactly why Christians believe it's a revelation, not something humans invented, but something God disclosed because we couldn't reach it on our own. If fitra was enough, the nations wouldn't have fallen into idolatry and worshipped animals, demons, and men. Human nature is broken. So the so-called pure instinct didn't preserve people from corruption. It needed to be healed.
Oh my, fitra is not the same as nafs. Fitra is the pure natural human inclination. Anything impure is not from fitra but from the soul which is nafs.
And that's exactly why God, in his mercy, became man, not by ceasing to be God, but by taking on human nature to restore ours. As Athanasius put it, he became what we are so that we might become what he is.
So according to him, he became human so we can become God. Wow, how inspiring.
Richard Swinburne, coming at it from a philosopher's angle, backs this up. A perfectly loving God would want to stand in solidarity with us, not just commanding from a distance, but stepping into our world, sharing in our suffering, teaching us directly by example, and offering reconciliation in the most personal way possible. That's not a betrayal of divine greatness, it's the highest expression of
Isaiah 42:8 I am the Lord, that is my name. I will not yield my glory to another or my praise to idols. Isaiah 40:18 To whom then will you liken God? Or what likeness will you compare with him? Numbers 23:19 God is not a man, that he should lie, neither the son of man, that he should repent. Osea 11:9 For I am God, and not man, the holy one among you. I will not come against their cities.
it.
Sometimes people say, but God can do anything. Couldn't he become a man if he wanted to? But think carefully. God is capable of all things. But God being a man is not a thing. It would be like asking, can God make a squared circle? And even if something like that were somehow real, becoming weak, limited, and dependent would never befit his majesty. Can God become a pile of dirt? A pile of waste? Poop? Of course not. It's not about God's power. It's about his perfection and his attributes.
There is no contradiction in saying that Jesus had two natures, fully God and fully man, united in one person. A contradiction means affirming and denying the same thing in the same way, but that's not what Christians are doing. Jesus is immortal according to his divine nature, immortal according to his human nature. That's not incoherent, that's historic Christianity. The Council of Chalcedon laid it down centuries ago. Two natures not fused, not blurred, not watered down, each retaining its attribute.
The hypostatic union posits that Jesus is both fully divine, omniscient, omnipotent, immortal, omnipresent, and fully human, limited in knowledge, power, subject to death, and localized in space. These properties are logically incompatible. Something cannot be both omniscient and not omniscient, or immortal and subject to death, at the same time and in the same sense. A contradiction arises because God cannot die, 1 Timothy chapter 6 verse 16, yet Jesus died, Mark chapter 15 verse 37. God knows all things, yet Jesus confessed ignorance about the day and hour of his return. Mark chapter 13 verse 32. God is unchangeable, yet Jesus grew in wisdom and stature. Luke chapter 2 verse 52. You can't affirm both sets of contradictory attributes without resorting to special pleading or a breakdown of basic logic, i.e., violating the law of non-contradiction. Even your early church father, Irenaeus, agreed with me that Jesus is lesser than the Father who knows all things, and the Father is above all things, greater than Jesus. Therefore Jesus isn't the Father nor God.
That's in direct contrast to Monophysitism, the heresy that said Christ only had one nature after the incarnation, a divine one. Or even worse, Eutychianism pushed that further, claiming Christ's humanity was basically dissolved into his divinity like a drop of honey in the ocean, leaving a third mutated nature that was neither fully God nor fully man. But Jesus isn't a fusion. The divine nature stayed infinite. His human nature was real, limited, and able to suffer, and both are united in one person, the eternal Son of God. That's what we call the hypostatic union. It's deep, yeah, but it's not a logical impossibility like a squared circle. And if your big rebuttal is, can God become poop? Congrats, you've left theology and entered middle school. God didn't unite himself to garbage. He united himself to human nature, made in his image. If you can't tell the difference between man and a piece of poop, you're honestly just clowning yourself.
Think carefully. If someone claims God became a man, they are also claiming, astaghfirullah, that God would be eating, sleeping, urinating, defecating. How absurd would it be to claim that about the Lord of the worlds? Exalted is Allah above what they attribute to him. This is not humility, it is blasphemy against his perfection. Allah is pure and perfect, far above any human weakness.
The Christian God doesn't stay distant from weakness, he steps into it out of love. Philippians 2 says Christ, being in the very nature of God, humbled himself and emptied himself, not by losing his divinity, but by taking on humanity. And Hebrews 2 and 4 says that he became like us in every way to become a merciful high priest, able to sympathize with our weaknesses. When Jesus ate, slept, and suffered, he did so in his human nature, not the divine one, and that's not weakness. That's what true greatness actually looks like. Meanwhile, Farhan, your Quran says that Jesus and Mary ate food, as if Christians ever denied that Jesus had a real body or thought Mary was part of the Trinity. That's not an argument, that's a straw man, because your book can't refute the real doctrine. And I'm not sure that Muhammad actually knew what the doctrine was. Corruption and death didn't scare the Word, they summoned him. The real blasphemy isn't that God came near, it's thinking the Creator's love is too high to stoop that low.